Well, as promised, we have my favorite O-line, D-line guru, the great Brandon Thorn. We've had him on multiple times before. Love the backstory of how he got involved in being an O-line, D-line guru, but I'm going to let you tell it again real quickly here, Brandon, because you are a testament to someone becoming an expert at something you have a passion about, even though you didn't really do it yourself or you didn't do it at a high level yourself. I love that story about your story.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I started. I was originally out of high school. I played in high school, played offensive line, so I got a little taste of it there. But out of high school, I went to the military, and I was in the Air Force for 10 years. And during that time, and even throughout childhood as well, just a huge NFL fan, football fan, Madden fan. So I knew a lot of the players, the rosters of most teams, stuff like that. Just dreamt about building a team and what it took to identify talent, scout players. That was always just kind of a passion of mine. So carried that through the military, and then had an opportunity to get out a little early, to pursue this, and decided to just go, head first into it, go all the way in, just start from nothing. And no real connections or anything, and then connections just started to kind of happen. In Colorado at the time when I got out, Ted Sundquist was living in Colorado Springs, basically near me, who's a former general manager of the Broncos and also an Air Force veteran. And I just found him on Twitter, saw he had a website with not a lot of content on it, and I was like, hey, can I just write stuff for you for free and just kind of pick your brain, basically. And he said, yeah. And then we joined together on a podcast, and got to meet a lot of people through that. And then it just built. I did the scouting academy for a couple semesters through Dan Hatman, which was outstanding. And yeah, just one thing just kept building off another, and had to do stuff, for free for a while, but I was in a good position to do that with the military, and my wife, and a lot of support. So did that for a few years. And then really, offensive and defensive line was something I was the most passionate about. And I felt like I knew the most about just going in. And then when I learned more about it, and I saw, simultaneously that not a lot of people were talking about it, especially online. I thought that I could, focus in on that specifically around, I think that was like 2014, 2015. And yeah, just been able to build a niche focusing on the trenches and just shining light on, offensive and defensive line play, which, and learning along the way. So it's been really kind of like a dream job for me the last few years, especially. But yeah, so that's how I started and what I do. And I'm very thankful to do it.
You can check him out like I do on social media at Brandon Thorn NFL. And I don't know how I started seeing your tweets, your video clips on my feed, but I greatly appreciate them because I don't have a chance to watch the end zone copy, which is what linemen watch as much as I'd like because I have too many jobs. Um, so
Yeah.
I love the fact that you do get a chance to watch the tape. And I reached out to you because you recently had a pretty good cut up of Jordan Mailata, who's a favorite of mine in the run game from the last two
Hmm.
playoff games. And it just triggered me. You know what? I want to get Brandon on, talk about line play, but in particular, let's go over the matchups in this game. Um, is it fair to say, Brandon, in your mind, do you think the Eagles have the best offensive line and defensive line in the NFL?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, which is really crazy. I can't remember the last time that's happened, but yeah, I do. I do think they have the best O line for sure. They've had the best O line the whole year. I think Cleveland was close, at various times, I thought, just in terms of talent and then also just how well they were playing. But uh, Philly has been the top unit, I think, in my preseason rankings, and then it hasn't really wavered throughout the whole year. They kind of fit, the bill. They were as expected. maybe then some, especially as of late in the playoffs. And the defensive line, I think, was in the same tier as the 49ers and, maybe one other unit, potentially. But so I think they're tier one for sure. And then, you can make the case to the best. And I think that they've probably been the best, especially the last maybe second half of the season. I mean, it's the talent, it's the depth, inside, outside. I think the depth really, though, for them is what really just, makes them so special. They just have waves, their second unit could be better than a lot of starting units, I think, in the NFL. And then the production matches that with their sacks and pressures and all that.
I think it's a really good point. Their second unit is really good. I mean, they basically go like 10 deep,
Yep.
Along the defensive line. And like I noticed, they didn't have a single D lineman play more than 28 snaps or 29 snaps against the 49ers. Like
Wow.
that. Now, obviously, the Niners didn't possess the ball that much, but that's still just incredible. What's interesting to me, though, is off the top of my head, I don't know if you have your rankings in front of you, but I would think that the Chiefs O line is a top 5 O line. And I would think their D line is up there too with the way Frank Clark's playing. Chris Jones is just incredible. Karlaftis has done some good things this year. Where do you think? I know you do it by tiers and rankings. Where does the Chiefs O line and D line stack up in terms of your rankings?
Yeah, I've had the Chiefs O line as a top 5 unit most of the season, and a different tier, of course, than Philly. But I think that second tier is totally fair and justified for them, and it's a lot different being in a different tier than Philly. But the strength of their unit is on the interior. Their interior 3, I think, has the case, for being a tier 1 collection of talent, that trio. If you stack all the, those 3 interior positions across the NFL, I'd put them in the top tier, with Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Joe Tooney. Trey Smith is kind of the quote unquote weak link of that unit in terms of the interior, but what he brings, I think he's probably a top 10 right guard in the league. So not a top 2 guy like Creed and Joe Tooney are, but he's still very young. And he's just one of those rare guys who's like a Wyatt Teller, Quentin Nelson, maybe a young Roger Saffold, maybe 1 or 2 other guys who are just simply bigger and stronger than most of the guys they go against. And he could just impose his will on guys. Maybe not the cleanest yet technically, but he's just that enforcer, tone setter kind of guy, on their interior and on their offensive line. So their interior is phenomenal. And then their tackles are, they're functional, I think, in Orlando Brown and Andrew Wiley. So and Patrick Mahomes rights a lot of wrongs, when those guys lose. I'm going to do a film room today actually on their prior game against the 49ers and just how well they mitigate their weaknesses through scheme. It's just phenomenal what Andy Reid does. So, excuse me, not the 49ers, but their prior game, I'm going to do a film room against the Bengals, in terms of highlighting what they do well to mask, their weaknesses in pass protection at tackle. So they cover up things very well, and they're just, I think probably the 5th or 6th best unit in the NFL heading in. And, in the playoffs, I had them, I think, as the 2nd best unit when it all started. So
What about the Chiefs D line? I feel like that's the unit that I'm most interested in, that maybe I don't know as much in terms of how you would have them ranked. Where do they stack up in your mind, Brandon?
yeah, so my final week 18 rankings, with all 32 teams, I had them at 11 overall. Right near kind of the Dolphins, the Chargers, Broncos, Vikings. They were all kind of in a similar kind of tier, but it really starts with Chris Jones, who I think, is the best interior pass rusher in football this year, arguably the defensive player of the year. I think he's certainly on the podium for that. And he's just, he had an absolutely incredible year with what he did inside. He's kind of a closer for that team, for that defense. So he's just phenomenal, first team all pro kind of guy. And then after that, they kind of have a collection of capable guys, who some are ascending, like a George Karlaftis from Purdue, rookie. He's pretty solid. He could do some things on the outside, kicks inside once in a while. Pretty good power rusher. I think their second best pass rusher actually is a very unknown guy named Mike Dana, who number 51. He's an undersized. I think he's technically listed as a defensive end, but he primarily does all his damage inside, kicked inside over a guard. And he's very quick, not a lot of surface area to block on him, low to the ground, good natural leverage, good with his hands. So he gives guards a lot of trouble. The problem with that is if you catch him on a rundown, especially Philly, they're going to demolish him. So they have to be careful about having a guy like that on the field. But on passing downs, he's very effective. So Dana, Chris Jones, Karlaftis, and then they have Frank Clark and Carlos Dunlap as well. So they have guys who can really give guys trouble, especially guys like Jordan Mailata. I think if it's obvious pass down situations, I could see this defensive line, giving Philly some trouble a little bit. But that's the conundrum with Philly. You don't know pass and rundowns very well, and if you have the wrong personnel on the field when you think it's pass and they run, they could just blow you open for a big gain. So that's the tough part. But yeah, I think this is a fringe top 10 pass rush unit, and they have some pretty good guys, led by Chris.
So, watching your clips of Mailata and Dickerson in the run game, I've been trying to tell people in Philly all year. I don't know if you've ever seen those guys up close. They are both very physically impressive dudes. Mailata is 6'8", 380. Dickerson is 6'6" plus and all of 340. And watching your clips, Brandon, this week, you just don't see things like that in the NFL very often.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're rolling D tackles out of there, 5 yards deep. I mean, that just doesn't. Usually, if you're a D tackle that gets taken for a 5-yard ride, like you're fired. Like they can't have guys like that. And I think they have really good technique from Stoutland, but also, I mean, they're just young. I mean, both of them are like in their mid-20s, and they're like at peak prime roll people off the ball years. They kind of get overshadowed because Kelsey is an all-timer at center and Lane Johnson's an all-time. I mean, both those guys are like Hall of Fame caliber players.
Right.
But I wanted you to comment on the weapons and the movement that the left side of the Eagles line is in the run game.
Yeah, so you touched on it already with the size, combined 700 pounds plus on that left side. And I think the thing that makes them really special, aside from the size and the power, is their movement skills as well. Like they're not, necessarily the plodding kind of guys that you would expect, especially Mailata. He moves, extremely well for his size. And I did a film room on their Giants game last week. And some of the outside zone stuff, they don't run it a whole lot. At least they did in that game. They ran it a couple times, and on outside zone away, I mean, Dickerson and Mailata, climbing up on those backside combos to the second level. I mean, they could erase linebackers as well, moving laterally. So they have that kind of in their back pocket as well. But yeah, their bread and butter, on inside zone and any kind of front side, double team, deuce block, any kind of, situation like that where they're blocking down, on a 3 technique to the backside linebacker. They're just going to cave guys in. And especially with the light boxes that they're facing with Jalen Hurts on the field and what that does for teams, for defenses and how they have to respect that. It frees up and, clears out a lot of that trash. So they really just have to deal with that 3 technique. And I mean, those 2 guys can erase pretty much, any 3 technique in the league, for the most part, especially with the teams that they're facing. It's funny. I thought Cincy was probably a better matchup for them because they had DJ Reader, BJ Hill, and then Tuapu, I think is his name. Those are all good run defenders, all like 320, 330 guys. But KC and the Giants and, the teams that they're facing, I just don't think that they have the bodies, on the interior to really combat, Mailata and Dickerson in the run game. So, and then when they go 2-eye, when they see fronts with the 2-eye on the front side on their side, they'll just pin him with Landon Dickerson and fold Kelsey, and then let Mailata kick out the front, the front side end. So they can be dominant in multiple ways against multiple alignments. And it's just, I don't know how you really slow them down, honestly. But yeah, Mailata and Dickerson, I like giving them a little bit more love and shine, because of what you said. Kelsey and Lane deservingly get most of it. But yeah, those two guys, with as young as they are, man, it's a special left side, I think. And I was a huge Dickerson fan coming out of Bama, and then Mailata's story obviously is incredible as well. So it's a really cool story, and just that whole offensive line is just, it's amazing.
Kind of sounds like, Brandon, you think the Eagles have a good chance to run over the Chiefs. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just, based on what you just said, Chiefs not a good matchup, don't have the bodies. Kind of sounds like you think that there's a real possibility the Eagles could run the Chiefs over.
I think it's a possibility for sure. I mean, Derek Nandi is a pretty good run defender. I will say that. But the thing with the Giants, that they ran into, Dexter Lawrence is obviously a stud. Leonard Williams was playing hurt, but he's still pretty good, even not 100%. The problem is though, is when those guys need a breather, the depth, was very poor for the Giants. And anytime they had a backup in, they just got ran over. And I think the same thing would probably happen with the Chiefs. Derek Nandi, like I said, he's their best, nose tackle kind of run defender. But man, when he needs a breather, you're going to have to put in somebody, Kalen Saunders. They have Brandon Williams, which is kind of interesting, but I think he's, barely hanging on. They signed, maybe he has 10 snaps left in him, of the old Brandon Williams. We'll see. That would be huge. But they're going to need it, because that's the thing. If you had this great depth, that's a different story. But I don't see the Chiefs having great depth on the interior of their defensive line, and I think that's going to be tested, and it could be a huge liability. So we'll see, but it's going to be a challenge.
Last question, Brandon. Lane Johnson. There's a lot of talk this week about how quick he's getting off the ball. Niners fans believe he's false starting. I've seen the clips. Kind of wanted to get your opinion on false start or no false start as it relates to Lane.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is a really interesting topic that I've touched on quite a bit with different guys, and I think several elite or even very good level guys at tackle specifically have done this over the years. Bakhtiari has done this for a long time. Brian Bulaga, when he was there, and Lane now is kind of the master at it. And I mean, they have it down to a science, and it's very difficult. I think when we have the benefit of the remote, the benefit of replay. It's easy to kind of see sometimes where he does just move a little early, but in real time, it's so precise and so close that it's just difficult to call it. And they have it down to where they put the refs kind of in that gray area consistently. And it's I think it's a really savvy thing to do, because as the first guy off the ball, in the trenches, typically is the guy who's going to win the rep. So just having that split second advantage is huge. And then on top of it, Lane Johnson is incredibly athletic. He gets to his landmarks, regardless of level of competition first. So then when you add in that, split second advantage, it just becomes very difficult to be in Lane Johnson and pass protection. I understand the frustration. It's the whole season and really the last several years. I mean, Lane Johnson's been doing this. Now it's a big topic, but it's nothing new. And this is just kind of how Lane plays. And it's just got a lot of recognition as of late. But from what I understand, that back foot, you can adjust it pre-snap as long as your trunk doesn't move, your head doesn't move. You can kind of move that back foot a little bit. Trent Williams does this a lot as well. And, it's kind of a gray area between adjusting your back foot and coming off the ball with the back foot leading the way. So it's difficult to pin down for a ref in real time. And Lane Johnson is just spamming it consistently. And yeah, he's having a lot of success with it. I think it's great. But yeah, from a defensive perspective, I get it. It's tough, to face.
Brandon, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. This was awesome. Exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, my pleasure, Ross. Thanks for having me.